She wasn't supposed to die this young, and certainly not like this. At just 28, Christina Marie Riggs became one of the youngest women ever executed in the United States. To her patients, she was the kind of nurse you'd trust with your life, calm, kind, always in control. But beneath that quiet smile was something no one saw coming. Because one November night, Christina stopped saving lives, and decided to take them instead. What drove a devoted mother and medical professional to do the unthinkable? Was it madness, despair, or something darker? The case of Christina Riggs is one of those stories that blurs the line between tragedy and evil. And the truth about what happened inside her small Arkansas apartment still leaves people divided to this day. But to understand how a woman who once healed others could end her own children's lives, you have to go back to the night she made the decision that sealed her fate. It was November 4, 1997, a quiet Tuesday in Sherwood, Arkansas. To everyone around her, Christina Riggs looked like just another tired nurse finishing a long shift. But that afternoon, as she walked out of Arkansas Heart Hospital, she wasn't heading home to rest. She was heading home to die. In her pockets were hospital drugs that no patient had been prescribed: morphine, potassium chloride, and a bottle of Elavil, a powerful antidepressant. She knew exactly what they could do. She'd used them hundreds of times before, but never like this. To her coworkers, she was reliable, compassionate, someone who stayed late to help others. No one could have guessed that, in her mind, she'd already made peace with a decision she couldn't undo. A decision that, within hours, would make national headlines. As Christina left the hospital parking lot, she wasn't thinking about her next shift or her patients. She was thinking about her two children, Justin, 5 years old, and Shelby, not yet 2. And in her mind, she'd convinced herself that what she was about to do was an act of mercy. That night wasn't just another day ending. It was the beginning of a countdown to tragedy. That evening, Christina drove to her mother's house, just like she always did. Carol, her mom, had watched the kids while Christina worked, nothing unusual. But that night, Carol noticed something different. A look in her daughter's eyes that didn't feel right. When she asked if everything was okay, Christina smiled and said yes. She handed her mother some cash she owed, hugged her kids, and walked out the door. It was the last time anyone would see them alive. Back home, the routine was heartbreakingly normal. Dinner, bath time, cartoons. Christina laughed with her children, tucked them into bed, and kissed their foreheads goodnight. For a moment, everything seemed calm, peaceful, even. But peace was never part of her plan. At around 10 p.m., she told her son Justin he could have a piece of candy before bed, a little treat for being good. He smiled, happy, unaware that what he was swallowing wasn't candy at all. The pills she gave him, and later to his little sister, were lethal doses of Elavil, enough to make them drift into unconsciousness within minutes. Christina sat quietly by their beds, watching them breathe slower and slower. She waited for the drugs to take effect, her mind blank, her body trembling. What came next would turn that quiet apartment into a scene no one would ever forget. As the pills took hold, the apartment fell silent. Justin's breathing slowed, his small chest rising and falling unevenly. Christina stood beside the bed, clutching a syringe of potassium chloride, the same chemical used in executions. But she hadn't diluted it properly. When she injected it, Justin's body reacted instantly. He jolted awake in confusion and agony, crying out for his mother. His body convulsed, his heart spasming as the compound burned through his veins. Christina froze. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Panicking, she reached for another syringe, this time filled with morphine, hoping to calm him, but it was too late. The morphine couldn't undo the damage. Justin screamed, kicked, begged. And in that moment of chaos, Christina did the unthinkable. She grabbed a pillow and pressed it over his face until the struggle stopped. Then she turned to Shelby. She couldn't bear to use the needle again, not after what she'd seen. Instead, she chose the same suffocating silence. Within seconds, the room was still. When it was over, Christina didn't run. She carried their bodies to her own bed, laid them side by side, and pulled the blankets up to their shoulders, tucking them in as if it were any other night. Then she sat down and began to write. 3 letters, one to her mother, one to her sister, and one to her ex-husband. In them, she apologized. Explained that she couldn't bear the thought of leaving her children behind, that she didn't want them growing up separated or ashamed. When she was done, she swallowed a massive dose of pills and injected herself with the same deadly compound. She lay down beside her children, closed her eyes, and waited to die. But death didn't come. Morning came, but Christina's apartment stayed silent. Her mother, Carol, couldn't shake a terrible feeling. She hadn't heard from her daughter since the night before, something that never happened. By late afternoon, worry turned to panic. She drove to Christina's apartment, knocked on the door, and waited. No answer. She called out her name. Still nothing. So she used her spare key and stepped inside. The smell of medication hit her first, sterile and bitter. Then she saw the bedroom door slightly open. And what she saw inside shattered her. Her grandchildren, Justin and Shelby, lay side by side on the bed, tucked in as if they were sleeping. Christina was on the floor beside them, pale, barely breathing, her skin cold to the touch. Carol's scream pierced the quiet. She called 911, her voice shaking so hard the operator could barely understand her. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They rushed to Christina first. Her pulse was faint, but it was there. They worked fast, loaded her into the ambulance, and sped to Baptist Memorial Hospital. By 5:30 that evening, doctors had pumped her stomach and stabilized her. She was alive, but the children were gone. As word spread, detectives swarmed the apartment. Syringes, medication bottles, 3 farewell letters. Piece by piece, they began to understand what had happened inside that quiet home. And while Christina lay in her hospital bed, sedated and silent, police were already preparing for what came next, an interrogation that would make even the most seasoned detectives go cold. Less than 24 hours after the discovery, detectives walked into Christina's hospital room. She was awake, weak, pale, but conscious. They read her rights, turned on the recorder, and started asking questions. They didn't need to push. Christina spoke softly, almost emotionless, as if she'd already accepted what came next. In just 8 minutes, she confessed to everything. Every detail. She told them how she'd crushed the pills into candy, how Justin screamed in pain when the injection burned through his veins, how she used a pillow to finish what she had started. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. She said she thought she was doing the right thing, that no one would understand, that her children would be taken away if she died alone. In her mind, she said, she was saving them. When detectives asked why she hadn't told anyone she was struggling, she whispered, because nobody wanted them. That line broke the room. By the time she finished, there was no mystery left to solve, just a recording of a mother describing how she ended her children's lives, step by step. Later that same day, Christina was booked into the Pulaski County Jail and charged with 2 counts of capital murder. She didn't fight. She didn't plead for sympathy. She just kept repeating one thing: I want to die. I want to be with my babies. But as investigators dug deeper into her past, they discovered something that made the story even harder to understand. Because Christina Riggs hadn't always been a killer, she'd once been a survivor. Christina Marie Riggs didn't come from darkness, she was born into it. She grew up in Oklahoma City, the middle of a quiet neighborhood that hid a house full of secrets. Behind closed doors, she faced things no child should ever endure. Years later, she told investigators that a relative had sexually abused her when she was just a girl. By 14, she was already numbing the pain with cigarettes, alcohol, and whatever else made the memories fade. At 16, she got pregnant for the first time. She carried the baby to term, and then gave it up for adoption. It was a decision she rarely spoke about again. But somehow, she kept going. She earned her nursing license, built a career, tried to rebuild a life that never really felt stable. On paper, it looked like success. Inside, the same darkness followed her everywhere she went. In 1992, she had a son, Justin. The father disappeared before he was born. Then came Shelby, 2 years later, with her husband, John Riggs. For a moment, it seemed like things were finally turning around. But the marriage didn't last. Christina accused John of being violent toward Justin, said she once saw him punch the boy in the stomach. That, she said, was the breaking point. She left him soon after. From then on, she was alone, working long hospital shifts, raising 2 children, and fighting depression that no one seemed to notice. She kept smiling through the exhaustion, the bills, the loneliness. But every night, it got harder to hold everything together. Doctors later testified that she suffered from severe, untreated depression, worsened by trauma, stress, and guilt. Others said the real breaking point came when she worked near the site of the Oklahoma City bombing, surrounded by death she couldn't save. Whatever the reason, by the end of 1997, Christina wasn't just tired, she was broken. And when she finally snapped, she didn't ask for help. She convinced herself the world would be better off if none of them woke up tomorrow. By the time Christina Riggs stood trial in 1998, the world already knew her story. The confession tape, the letters, the evidence, it was all there. There were no mysteries left to solve, only a single question: why? Her defense argued insanity. They said years of abuse, depression, and trauma had hollowed her out until she couldn't tell right from wrong. That she wasn't a monster, she was sick, lost, and drowning in her own mind. Psychologists testified that Christina showed signs of severe depression, low self-esteem, and post-traumatic stress. They described her as a woman living in constant guilt, a nurse who'd seen too much death and carried every bit of it with her. But prosecutors didn't see a broken woman. They saw control, planning, and intent. They said Christina had calmly stolen hospital drugs, written farewell letters, and carried out the murders step by step. This wasn't madness, they said, it was choice. And when the jury heard her confession, the one she gave from her hospital bed, the courtroom went silent. 8 minutes of calm, emotionless truth, the kind that left no room for doubt. It didn't take long for the verdict. Christina Riggs was found guilty on all counts of capital murder. Then came the sentencing phase, and this was where she shocked everyone. Her lawyers begged her to fight for her life, to appeal, to show remorse. She refused. Standing before the judge, she looked up and said, "I want to die. I want to be with my babies." It wasn't a plea, it was a decision. From that moment on, she gave up every appeal, one after another, until nothing stood between her and execution. And as the date drew closer, she never changed her mind. To the state of Arkansas, it was justice. To some, it was mercy. To others, it was another tragedy, one that began long before the crime ever happened. On May 2, 2000, Christina Riggs faced the last moments of her life. She had been transferred to the Cummins unit, the place where the state carried out its executions, and she did not resist. There were no protests, no last-minute appeals, no tears, only quiet acceptance. 12 hours before, she had been offered a final meal. She chose a supreme pizza with salad, pickled okra, strawberry shortcake, and cherry lemonade, a small comfort in a day marked by finality. When the team began preparing her for lethal injection around 8:40 p.m., finding a suitable vein proved difficult. The process took nearly 15 minutes, but Christina remained calm, silent, and composed. Once the gurney straps were secured, she spoke one final message to her children. "There are no words to express how sorry I am for taking the lives of my babies. There's no way to make up for the pain I've caused." Then, her voice steady, she added, "Now I can be with my babies, just as I always intended. I love you, my babies." The drugs flowed, and at 9:28 p.m., Christina Marie Riggs was pronounced dead. She was 28 years old. The first woman executed in Arkansas since 1845. The youngest woman executed in modern U.S. history. Some called it justice. Some called it tragedy. And some wondered if anything could ever truly explain how a mother could take the lives of her own children. Christina Riggs' story doesn't end with her death. It lingers in questions that refuse to be answered. Was this justice? Or was it tragedy wrapped in inevitability? Some say she acted under untreated mental illness, a woman crushed by trauma and depression. Others argue there's simply no excuse for what she did, a mother choosing death over life for her children. The truth may be impossible to know. All we can do is remember the lives lost, the pain left behind, and the warning signs that went unnoticed. Her case forces a haunting question. When someone is broken beyond repair, can justice ever truly heal the wounds left behind, or does it simply close one chapter while leaving the rest of the story unfinished? And in the end, that question stays with us, long after the news fades, long after the courtroom empties. What do you think? Was it justice, mercy, or a tragedy that could have been prevented?